Talent Office for the SDE. We are finally pleased to be able to get started. Thank you for joining us. I want to begin by thanking and introducing my partners in this work. I'll begin with my CSDE colleagues, Amanda Pickett and Dr. Jessica Ocasio. And I also want to shout out our Region 2 Comprehensive Center partners in this important work, Dr. Saroja Warner, Dr. Meg Cavan, and Yvonne Allen. The Region 2 Comprehensive Center serves state education agencies and their regional and local constituents in Connecticut, New York, and Rhode Island. The R2CC has been supporting the work led by the CSDE to increase educator diversity for the last 5 years. And we are delighted that they continue to be our partners in this important work. We'd like to know who is in this virtual room. So if you would please use the chat to introduce yourself by providing your name and title, your district or educational organization, and indicate whether you participated in the Increasing Educator Diversity Coaching Series. We'd appreciate it. Thank you. Next slide, please. When people gather as a group, there's an opportunity to create an inclusive community and culture, or not. Establishing community agreements helps us to identify concrete ways to create an inclusive culture that supports talking about and working through what may be uncomfortable topics. Developing community agreements is a powerful strategy to establish an inclusive, safe, supportive, open, and trusting environment. It is important to ground the conversation about increasing educator diversity in the language of the work. We do not use the word minority because it is a pejorative term. We use and urge you to use language that affirms people, educators, students, families, and communities of color. Equitable language facilitates equitable practice. It will be important for you in this work to develop a shared meaning for terms like diversity, equity, and unconscious bias. Next slide, please. This slide reflects the intended outcomes for today's session. You will learn about the resources and tools available to support your development of a strong increasing educator diversity plan, learn from your peers about strategies and best practices for assembling a strong team to lead the work of increasing educator diversity, and understand the importance of conducting a root cause analysis, because correctly identifying the issues or barriers to increasing educator diversity will inform your SMART goals. Next slide, please. We are pleased to share that among the CSDE resources that have been created and comprehensively located in one place is on the Talent Office homepage. If you click on, you will see what is a district resources box. If you click on bullet number 3, which is increasing educator diversity, you will be able to access information and resources that will support your development of your increasing educator diversity plans. They include recorded webinars, PowerPoint slide decks, the guidebook and the toolkit, and the increasing educator diversity template, which is found in the toolkit appendix that you will need to use to build and submit your increasing educator diversity plan. You will also find frequently asked questions among the resources. Next slide, please. And I will pass it to my colleague, Saroja.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. So Dr. Hopkins just mentioned the toolkit that is available to you all on the website. The link for that, I think, is in the slides. It'll be shared with the slide deck at the end. But we wanted to just give you an overview for those of you who have not cracked the binding on this document yet. I feel really proud of it. I think it's a really useful document. It's something that we developed last year through this project in collaboration with district leaders as well, who gave a lot of feedback and input. The guidebook and then the toolkit is really meant to support all of the work you're doing to create ultimately a plan of action for increasing educator diversity. The toolkit is very practical in nature. It's a much smaller document than the entire guidebook. And the toolkit is broken up into these parts. Over the course of the next few months before March 15th, the CSDE is going to be presenting in collaboration with us at the Region 2 Comprehensive Center and WestEd a number of TA support webinars. This toolkit is really going to be, I think, your most important resource you can have. And so I encourage you to get into it, look through it if you haven't already. There's a nice introduction at the top of the toolkit that talks about the state context for this work, a little of the evolution of the work in the state focused on increasing educator diversity. But then there are some getting started pieces in there, pre-planning tasks, as we call them, how to assemble a strong core team to lead the effort in your district, some tips and strategies and guidance around how to develop a vision, a shared theory of action, to do root cause analysis, how to develop the action plan itself, creating goals, and then some best practices as well about how to keep your effort moving forward, how to sustain the effort once you get started. The focus today for our webinar is really going to be on the beginning stages, the pre-planning tasks, and with a focus on root cause analysis and how to assemble a strong team. So stay tuned. Here we go. Starting with the team. I think like with any work that you're doing, reform effort or initiative in your organizations, we all appreciate that one person can't do it all, nor should one person do it all, even if they could, because it's really critical that you have a shared vision for what it is you want to be different for children in your systems, for families, for educators. And so putting together a strong core team is really critical to launch and then sustain an effective reform initiative like this one, where you're hoping to increase the diversity of educators in your system. In the toolkit, you'll see this guidance, but just to review it really quickly, we really find it to be effective to right size your core team. So sometimes, your team might not be large enough to accomplish all the things you want it to do. Sometimes it's too big to get anything done. And so we've learned from the research and evidence base around implementation and improvement science that a team of about 6 to 8 people is probably that sweet spot. That is probably a manageable size group to actually get your work done and for people to maintain effective communication lines. As with other types of teams that you organize, it's really critical that somebody is designated as the leader. This doesn't always have to be the superintendent or the DEI director. It's just got to be somebody who can take responsibility for keeping things moving along, setting up those check-in meetings with the team, ensuring every time the team meets, we have clear action items for the next time that we meet. Following up with folks on those action items. And so a core team of 6 to 8 with a designated team leader. And it's somebody who also is respected by other members of the team, by other stakeholders in your community. You certainly wouldn't want to put somebody in that spot as team leader that, I mean, let's be honest, that no one listens to. So these are some of those, those social and emotional skills you need to be considerate of when you're identifying the team members as well as the team leader. Um, an effective team is going to be made up of people too who have access to the key influencers, the key decision makers, the key people that you need to be partnering with and collaborating with regularly and routinely to move your goals forward. And so thinking about those community, cultural, capital assets that the team members have that you'll need to advance your goals is also a really critical thing to think about as you're assembling your core team. And then thinking about these last two items here, um, including the right mix of people to represent, those core, key stakeholders that you're in service of, right? And so making sure you have folks from different racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds, linguistic backgrounds, possibly and potentially people from the ground level in schools, people maybe from the district office, perhaps a advocate from the community, could be parent who's a leading voice in the community, could be if you have other partners from your communities you may want to include on the core team, but really being considerate and intentional as you put that together, that all voices are represented and that all of your interests are going to be well served by this core team that you assemble. Before I pass it on, I'm just going to pause and see if my colleagues here on the call have any other advice you want to offer too about assembling your core team.
So Rosha, you know me, I'm never quiet. And I know we're about to hear probably from two of the best core team members to share about their work in the district. I'm Amanda Pickett. I do climate and culture work at the district. And I think, just to stress the importance of really looking for diversity of perspectives within your own team to ensure that you're bringing many different lenses, students, families, influencers, thinking about ways that you can ensure that you're getting feedback, maybe not directly on your team, but in other ways as well. So I would just encourage really that diversity in thinking and ideas and perspectives as part of your team.
That's great. Thank you so much, Amanda, for adding in that. So now I think are we shifting now or in a few minutes? In a few minutes, we're going to shift and hear more from some of your peers, representatives from two districts, about how they assemble their core team in order to, do this work well.
Thank you, Dr. Warner. Yes, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our special invited guests who will share a bit about their process for assembling a team to support their work of creating a plan to increase educator diversity. We will begin with Altressa Cox Blackwell. She is the Director of Educational Equity for Enfield Public Schools. And then we will be joined by Charmaine Torres Davis and Andy George. Charmaine is the Director of Talent Recruitment and Retention for Sanford Public Schools, and Andy George is the Vice President of the Stanford Board of Education and also the current Labor Chair. Altressa, you're up first. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just so humbled to be invited to share what Enfield's been doing. So Enfield participated in the 2023 Increasing Educator Diversity Coaching Series, and that one was facilitated by the Connecticut State Department of Education and Region 2 Comprehensive Center. So the slide you're looking at, as Dr. Warner mentioned, the toolkit, page 3, recommends a team of 6 to 8 members for your core team. However, I cast a wide net by emailing information describing the coaching sessions to all members of our administrative council and asked them to consider participating in the 6-month IED series. In response to that email, 6 members expressed interest in participating, which included a commitment to meeting twice each month in addition to the coaching webinars. I was also working with a teacher as an 092 intern and invited her to participate as well. So last year, we had 8 participating members represented by the table you're looking at now. This year, we have 6 members. So we held our first team meeting last month and discussed continuing with 6 members or filling the open seats. Most of the team voted to continue our work as a team of 6. And as you can see, the configuration of our team reflects a variety of stakeholder perspectives. Some of us are parents, grandparents. We have the teachers union represented, actually the president. We have administrators from the elementary and secondary levels. Pupil services is represented, human resources, and some of us work with the entire district. And I was the facilitator or lead on the team. You can go to the next slide, please. So before crafting the 4 SMART goals displayed, members of our team individually completed the self-assessment tool to examine culturally responsive hiring practices through a lens of racial equity. And that tool consists of 6 domains. You can find that tool in the guidebook beginning on page 59. We came together and each shared our individual rubric scores, leading to a focus on domain 2, which is talent needs, and domain 3, which is attracting a diverse workforce, of which most of us had checked the boxes for no evidence at all or very little evidence. Our next step was to identify the root cause or root causes by conducting an analysis, continuously asking why. Got a little frustrating at some points, but we kept pushing it. Offering reasons and observable data. And this was our problem statement. We have been unable to attract diverse certified educators to more accurately reflect our student demographics. So that was what we addressed. This analysis tool is in the guidebook on page 28 when you start going through it. We identified causes such as having a separate application system or process instead of using CT-REAP, that some potential candidates found cumbersome and wouldn't complete. We also identified root cause as offering a lack of diversity on our interview teams, be it building level or district level. So going through this process led us to focus on domain 4, selecting and hiring for our SMART goals. Just to be clear, our non-certified staff is diverse. It's the diversity of our certified workforce that we need to focus on increasing. So then one goal is to include student participation and voice. And we have 2 reasons for this. One, seems pretty obvious. Students can offer a valid perspective of what makes an effective teacher. They're with teachers all day. And 2, participation encourages those considering education as a profession to continue with that pursuit, giving them an early inside glance into the process that they'll go through in the future. Then the last goal, the grow your own. We're currently participating in the CTTRP teacher residency program. We have 1 resident participating, and so it was smart to add that as a SMART goal. Slide 3, please. Thank you. This statement and logo represent 2 years of work and buy-in by all stakeholder groups. And I'm proud to say it was adopted by our Board of Ed as well as our town council. Thank you. I don't know if I take questions now or later.
Yes, before we let Stanford jump in here, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask your question or drop your question in the chat, whichever you're most comfortable doing.
Altressa, can I ask you a challenging question? Sorry to put you on the spot. How have you maintained the work? So you mentioned the coaching series and the team's commitment during that time. How have you kept momentum going? And what does that team's kind of work look like now?
Okay, so thank you. Great questions. Well, first of all, we needed to share the work of our team with our entire administrative council. So we had our administrative council meeting in September, and I acknowledged the team, thanked the team, and we shared even more than what I shared here because we worked on a vision statement. We worked on the theory of action. There's a template for our SMART goals and action plan. So all of that was shared with them. And in the sharing with them, we talked about what our work would be this year. So over the summer, I completed a Microsoft Forms for an interview team survey, which simply asked those facilitating interviews to just list the members of their team. The second goal talked about looking at combating bias. And so what we're working on now is creating a module to address cultural appropriateness and responsibility by looking at microaggressions and unconscious bias. And then I mentioned that we already have someone in CTTRP, and the goal with the student participation we're looking at for next year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Altressa. Charmaine and Andy, you are up. Next slide, please, for Stanford.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having us. Altressa, thank you for your share. So inspiring and lots of great work happening in Enfield. It was really a pleasure to go through the coaching series with you. So everyone, thank you for being here this afternoon. Honored to be asked to be a part of this discussion today, and pleased to provide any services we can as one of your honorary guinea pigs. And we are here with the cheat code. So on that note, part of our task today is to talk about the importance of building and assembling your IED planning team. If I had the luxury of hindsight, prior to this very important work, I will tell you that something I have learned as the team leader for Stanford Public Schools is that much to what has been shared thus far in this session is that everything will rely on the talent of your team. I love the slide that had 3 really powerful words: representation, talent, and influence. I will tell you, we learned all too well how important those 3 elements proved to be as we worked through this really enlightening work. And I want to thank the planners of the IET. This project, this teamwork is really something that is going to bring not only your team to a whole nother level, but your district in the work of increasing our the diversity of our workforce. So as you can see from the team that we were able to assemble, very fortunate in our district. We definitely had varied perspectives, and I will say that as opposed to Enfield, who stated they casted a wide net to try to find the best team members for this very important work. We actually cherry picked, and I really reached out to specific roles and different positions and those who were decision makers across our school community. And what I can tell you is there's no right way to do that. You have to proceed with the approach that works best for those you are serving. It was critically important to me as a team leader. And again, I mentioned we're guinea pigs here going through this, and I think Altressa can attest to that. This is all new work, and as you begin and embark upon this very important work, I just want to encourage you to stay open-minded and stay willing to welcome the varied perspectives. We were very fortunate to tap a sitting board member, and you'll hear from Mr. George in just a few moments, the president of one of our partners in the community through the United Way, Stanford Cradle to Career. We also have a sitting executive board member from our teachers union and someone who is actively teaching in the classroom. We have activated an immediate past president of our PT Council, which is the council that manages all of our PTOs and PTAs across Stanford. We included a school administrator, one of our assistant principals, and we were very fortunate to have an official from the city of Stanford, the DEI officer. So we were able to bring together so many different voices and perspectives and experiences. I would say the common thread was and is that everyone has the very omniscient points of view in the roles that they serve, but also have had so many varied experiences around the work of moving Stanford forward and supporting our students, their families, and our staff. So I would really say to be very intentional about the build, be very transparent about the work. The good news is now you know up front what the work will be. And I think it's important when you reach out that you're very clear about this is a heavy lift, but a meaningful and worthwhile set of tasks, and ultimately the plan that we all are going to be moving forward with in our various districts. So I just want to encourage everyone to really consider the various viewpoints and perspectives and seek out people. I asked for favors, I begged, I did everything I could. And as you can see, it was all worth it to bring these awesome positions and roles together for this work. I will tell you the actual sessions when it comes to going through the building of the plan will be very detailed and require lots of discourse. I can tell you that this has been an experience where I think we all had the opportunity to grow and continue to see our district in new lights. And what I loved about this work is, though we had active members of our school staffs and community members at the table together, our commitment was to keep our students centered and at center and at the top of our list of priorities around meeting needs. We disagreed, we agreed, we debated. That work is the getting through to the building of the plan. But I can tell you that there was no question about the common commitment across the committee and the team that we put together. So I can leave you with this. put your investment in the build. Take the time and the care to be very critical about who will join you in this work. If you have been honored with the task of being team leader for your district, be very intentional about who you invite along with you on this life-changing journey. I have to say, not to be dramatic, I've been with Stanford, this is my 30th year now, and I have to tell you, this is some of the most insightful, intense work, but I know that is also some of the most meaningful work that will have impact across all stakeholders in our district, and we can't always say that about each of the initiatives. This is one piece of work that will absolutely impact us all and for future groups to come. So having that said, I would love to have the honor of passing the baton. Dr. Regina, would you like me to do that, or are you going to introduce Mr. George?
Absolutely. Please feel free to pass the baton to Mr. George.
Okay, one of those very esteemed members of our team. You know, there's a saying in church, he looks high, but he sits high, but he looks low. And I will say that another common theme is we had lots of authority figures and those who were movers and shakers across our school community. But every single one of our team members, much like who I'm about to introduce, really on a daily basis knows how to roll up their sleeves and be a part of the work, boots on the ground level. I'm really honored to introduce you to our newly re-elected Board of Education member, Mr. Andy George, who really walks the talk. It amazes me just how down to earth and matter of fact, Mr. George always is about the importance of this work. He's an advocate for diversity and equity across the board. So without further ado, I'm really honored to welcome Mr. Andy George, one of our IED planning team members.
All right, well, thank you very much for that glowing introduction. I'm going to try and write down some of those adjectives. First of all, everyone can hear me, correct?
Yes,
Yep,
we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, good. I apologize. If the camera is not compatible with this browser, the video isn't working with Teams. So I apologize in advance for that. Yeah, I think for us in Stanford, one of the key issues was making recruiting a priority in the first instance. Despite our size, we historically didn't have someone dedicated to the recruiting function. It was kind of it was be part of another person's job, or the HR director would do it as part of their job. So I think it was critical right at the outset to actually have someone dedicated to recruiting and retention of our staff, not only just the SEA, the teachers, but as well the paraeducators and other staff folks as well. And you know, I think it depends. Other districts, especially smaller ones, it may not be able to have a single person or have a person where that's their single focus. But it's important nonetheless to make sure that the recruiting function is being served. So I think the second part of this is making, as a Board of Education, is to support the recruiting function and specifying that diversity is a key objective. So we've in Stanford have for a long time been seeking diversity in our teaching workforce, and it's only been met with I would like to call sort of lackluster results, not necessarily any particular person's fault. But again, it goes back to what's the focus, what's the mission, what's the support, and some of that's does rest with the Board of Education in terms of emphasizing, through the superintendent, what is the objectives. So so we wound up being able to, with the arrival actually of Ms. Tourse in the function, we've been making much better strides in the recruiting function and focusing on various other methods. I mean, previously we would attend job fairs at historically Black and brown universities, kind of doing some routine things, I guess, that just did not produce results. But I think now with Ms. Tourse in place and having a dedicated recruiting function, we will be seeing some improved results. And certainly the training we got from the state program this past year is an amplification of that. And I guess the last point that I would bring up as a Board of Education member is that we need to support the training of the teachers, because at least in our framework in Stanford, much of the hiring is done at the building level. So the recruiting teams are composed usually of teachers, some administrators at the building. Sometimes there is some cross-pollination of buildings where maybe an administrator from another building or an administrator from central office might be participating in the hiring process. But teachers and administrators at the buildings are not necessarily recruiting professionals. They might come with various amounts of experience, but they certainly don't have the training necessarily to what to look for as a recruiter. And certainly the unconscious bias issue is there, and they really need to be trained to try and cope with that. So as a board member, I think or as a Board of Education, we need to support the training, and that can come obviously in the form of supporting the financial aspects of training, but also the time that it takes to do the training. Because all too often, I think we will talk about, our people must be trained, but then we don't do enough to make sure that the execution occurs. So those are, I guess, my tidbits of information from a Board of Education members aspect. So I'm happy to answer questions or continue. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George. Really appreciate that perspective. Do you or Charmaine want to close us out with the equity statement and the shared vision for Stanford?
So this is just an excerpt from our larger equity policy that was recently passed. As I said, and to echo Mr. George's words, his sentiments around this is a real work in progress for our district. We have come a long way. We have a long way to go. There is real work to be done around the hearts and minds that must drive this work. This has to be beyond just the mandate. This is, I like to say our product is people, and we have to keep that in mind. So I'll just read this portion of our district policy on equity and diversity as it relates to recruitment and retention. I want to thank Mr. George and the entire board for understanding the need for this being a priority for us in the district. And as much as we all struggle to meet all the demands of the many mandates, I really am glad that this has now become a drop dead date expectation. This is more than just a hope and a wish. We have to get back on track. Listening to Enfield really inspired me to kind of light the fire under our team again. We had great momentum going, and we really need to pick up the ball and keep running. Not just because of the March deadline, but because we have children and families waiting for this work to be done. And we have staffs and schools that need this to happen. So I'll just say part of our vision in Stamford, the district is committed to increasing the recruitment and retention of highly qualified, diverse staff. The district, Stamford Public Schools, is committed to fostering a learning environment where diversity is encouraged and to recruiting and retaining a workforce that reflects the diversity of our students and community. Thank you so much for your time today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much to all three of our presenters. Wonderful, wonderful job. We appreciate you making the time. I know your schedules are always so busy, but you are here with us today, and we don't take that lightly. If there are any questions from those of you who are on the call, please unmute yourself or drop your question in the chat before we segue to the importance and role of the root cause analysis.
Honestly, Regina, I'm not sure how I follow up after those two presentations. And thank you again. I'm going to mirror just some thank yous because I think there's so much value in hearing from our districts and the work that they're doing to have this collaborative learning space with peers, but also us at the department, along with our partners in the Comp Center, worked really hard on some of those coaching materials and the guidebook and the toolkit. And so to hear you talk about how you've used those in implementation, I'm like beaming with pride, even though I'm just a teeny tiny piece of that work, and just want to give you some kudos and thank you again. And so now on to what next. I don't want to misstep the importance of having a committed and diverse team that you just heard from Enfield and Stamford, and ensuring that you take the time to fully engage in this deep root cause analysis. It's really important to have an intentional, I'm trying to steal some of the words that I heard, an intentional team where you're taking a lot of thought and consideration around the sustainability of that member, the influence they have, how this work might align to their efforts, influence that they might have in your community. So again, just kind of stressing the importance of having a really committed, diverse team. So once you got your team together, you're going to have to be engaging in some really courageous dialogue about how are we going to do this work? What do we need to know? And then how do we take that information and put it into an action plan? So in this phase, we aim to understand what issues are impeding the goal of a racially, ethnically, and linguistically diverse educator workforce. So as a team, you're going to dig into your data, you're going to search for clues, you're going to explore those wonders, those worries, those potential barriers, those systemic barriers that we've heard about, those mindset barriers that we've heard about, and some procedural barriers that we heard too. It's critical that during this work, your team follows norms. So having some community agreements, I think both of our colleagues shared about how having courageous, transparent, honest dialogue is a really important piece to get this root cause analysis done right. So encouraging you to make sure that you do have some norms for those conversations and work to uncover and uproot those personal and systemic biases. And like we heard from Stamford, being transparent about the work, sharing the work, ensuring you're getting feedback about the work and making sure that it's a commitment of the district. This is the phase that influences how you can leverage, create, or apply research-based interventions to address the changes that might need to be made. So I'm going to pass it off to Meg, and she's going to share a glimpse of what this process might uncover. And I think you've actually heard a couple examples from both of our districts, but Meg's going to woo you some with maybe what next.
Amanda, that's such a kind pass off. Thank you so much. And thank you again to our courageous and brave presenters for sharing your stories here in this space. We can all learn so much from the work that you have done, from your thinking on the work you have ahead of you. And we just wanted to take this opportunity in thinking about the root cause analysis to engage our whole audience in sort of thinking beyond the vision, the goal, really to the challenge of aligning the strategy that you're going to use with the specific challenge that you face in your district. And I think in talking with our team internally about this before we, before we presented to you, really the takeaway we want you to get from the next 2 slides and the exercise we're going to do here together is, moving beyond the identification of the symptoms to the diagnosis of the cause. So what we have done here and on the next slide is highlight a couple of scenarios that you might encounter through data analysis of your own internal data. And we're going to ask you to sort of pause, collectively take a moment in the chat to think through what are the strategies and metrics that you could leverage given this learning to both better understand what's going on in your district, in your context, and think about what you would do to move strategically toward your goal of an increasingly diverse educator workforce. So I'll read this one aloud and then invite sort of a collective minute and a use of the chat. And then we'll do the same on the subsequent slide. So your root cause analysis finds that candidates of color are applying, passing initial screenings, and interviewing, but have a lower likelihood of being offered a job than white candidates. And what we're asking you to do here is think about what are the strategies and metrics you can employ to measure and make progress toward greater educator diversity, right? Think about how do you better understand what's going on here? What are some of the things that are potentially happening given this scenario? And what do you, as an individual, what do you as a team think of as your next steps given this learning?
Meg, I'm going to pop in here because silence makes me antsy. And I think I put in the chat, any wonders, oh, I see awareness with data. So when I read this first, my root cause analysis finds this information. I immediately want to go, we need to peel back the onion even further. Why? And I think it might have been Altressa that mentioned that activity. And so I think being able to find the strategy and the metrics, I want to get even more granular about what is like why, what is the why, and what is it that we need to address. And so thinking about things like we heard, maybe we're using a system that's not accessible to candidates. Maybe we don't have a diverse interview panel and bias might be part of our process. Thinking about how do we uncover those things so we can be intentional about setting goals and then kind of monitoring that for success.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. And I just calling attention to Yolanda and to Lori who have popped into the chat bravely to suggest greater awareness with data or more data collection. I invite you to unmute and talk a little bit about what you mean by either of those. Layla or Lila, please correct me on the pronunciation of your name, suggest trying to find why they aren't moving forward. Amanda, this is your point, the why. Maybe we're using something that's unconsciously biased. Look at the interview panels and hiring managers and interview teams. Rubric and interview questions being used. What position?
Sorry, Meg, our participants can't unmute, so the chat is our jam.
Oh, okay. So my full read aloud of the chat is the best we've got. Thank you, Yolanda, and I'm sorry, Lori, to both of you for dangling that impossible carrot. Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of great chat here. I think, Laura, I appreciate you sort of naming a specific, like an action, a focus group with current students. Saroja, always in it for the, I don't know, is that an emoji? I think there's a lot of consistency here. We're seeing, explore the ways that we could learn more about what's impeding the process here. If there's nothing I've missed, I can jump us forward. Feel free to keep these ideas flowing in the chat because what's next is one more scenario which is that your root cause analysis finds that educators of color are leaving their positions at much higher rates than white educators, creating a predominantly and persistently white educator workforce. And so I think what we're trying to call attention to here, right? This is a different challenge than the one we had in the last scenario, where educators of color are applying to positions, they're qualified, they're passing screenings, they're being invited for interviews, and they're just not being offered jobs. What you're finding here is that actually the cause of the disparities and the segregation of your educator workforce, right? The royal you, the royal we, is the constant outflow of educators of color. And so those two different scenarios suggest two different approaches. And really what we're trying to do here is invite you to think about, not when it comes to putting together a plan for increasing educator diversity in your districts, we're challenging you to think about strategies and solutions that are really aligned to your specific challenge, and do not just reflect what is most easily accessible or available to you, right? We're not throwing spaghetti at a wall. We are, it's a surgical approach, right? We're diagnosing and we're treating the cause. Or ramen, yeah.
Meg, the other thing that I like about this example that you've included here is, in a little bit, we're going to show you the template for the action plan, and you'll see that it's really broken into 3 major components of increasing educator diversity work. But I think, and maybe I'm biased here being the climate and culture person, but I think as these discussions come to light, we've heard already there's things around professional learning that need to happen, but school climate efforts and work are also included here. And we've, talked to some districts about how they're doing this work with students and within their schools and classrooms. So it becomes a place that you can attract educators of color and you can keep them. So I appreciate this example, Meg, and I'm going to slightly plug some school climate efforts. If I can be any assistance to folks, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I think with that, I'm going to segue to the next slide if we can.
Mm-hmm.
And you heard, I gotta thank Altressa, because I think she might have done this slide and didn't even know she was doing it in her remarks, because she so eloquently highlighted all of the tools in the guidebook that they use to do the root cause analysis. So as you've been hearing, there's some work that needs to happen between now and March 15th, and the root cause analysis is really the heavy, heavy lift. This is where you need to make sure that you have that team and that you're taking the time to look at your data, to go through your information, qualitative and quantitative information, try to seek perspectives, and really get into how do we move forward with creating an action plan. So this root cause analysis, I've just broken this down into kind of a couple major components of what you're going to need to do potentially next. So this is a data-driven process. The first step is to review the data to understand the potential barriers and problems and your needs. So you're going to see noted here the guidebook appendices. I think Altressa even gave you the page numbers. I've provided them here as well with hyperlinks. So those are tools that we put in that guidebook that can really help you dig into your data to help kind of uncover some of these root causes. So once you have that information, you're going to need to develop a precise problem statement, which will assist you in formulating those SMART goals and those action items. Again, I'm just going to reiterate that all those tools and resources are available on the Talent homepage. You're going to get all of these links. You're going to get the slide deck, and they are all easily accessible on the Talent homepage link. And I think, Saroja, now it's your turn to kind of turn it over to the action plan. You're muted.
So sorry. Here we go. Yes, I was trying to fit my ramen in since I hadn't had a chance to eat. So thank you for that introduction there, segue. So this is a crash course, right? We just went from like, first you need to do all this lifting around root cause analysis, and now you're looking at a template to write a plan. So appreciating that this stuff isn't happening in real time that quickly. Once you do your root cause analysis, that's really what's going to help you identify your goals and what is available to you in the toolkit. I believe it's on page 15 in that toolkit, as a matter of fact, is this template. It's a PDF, writable PDF that you can use. This is the template that the department would really like to have you use when you submit your plans come March 15th. But some version of this is also fine, appreciating that you may want something with more space to write in, something that is going to include some additional elements. I'll say minimally, I think this is what you should be anticipating preparing to deliver on the 15th. But you'll see that the first column there is the goals. And so really thinking about, after you've done your root cause analysis, what does this mean then in terms of our priority areas? What are those things that we want to focus on? And I would say think 3 to 5 years. Like over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to take all this time to write a plan. Let's get really focused on our sort of short, medium, and long-term goals for the work. And so a 3 to 5 year plan gives you room to think about short, medium, and long-term. You'll notice too that in the template, it's organized around 3 parts of your pipeline. As much as the guidebook really focuses on recruitment and selection and hiring, we all know that the research and evidence says that unless we also address the current sort of revolving door into the in and out of the profession, we are not going to be very effective in changing the current landscape of educators for our students. So we need to think about recruitment, we need to think about hiring and selection, but we also need to think about what are the conditions that are either supporting us keeping the educators of color that we bring into the system, and what are those conditions that are pushing them out? In other words, how do we focus on ensuring once we've hired teachers of color, teachers from diverse racial, cultural, linguistic backgrounds, that we're supporting them and sustaining them so that they will stay? And so we've organized the template in these ways so that you can really sort of be intentional in your thinking as a team about those parts of the pipeline, the beginning, the middle, and then obviously ensuring that there's no end. I'll say it that way, that they stick around. The goals are really critical, and out of your root cause analysis, as I mentioned, you'll be able to better think about what those goals are. What is it that you're trying to do? I'm going to use a little example too, just to sort of practice this. If it's possible, can we go back 2 slides to the one that Meg was talking through? I'm going to use this as an example. Let's say you did your root cause analysis and this is where you were. You found that educators of color are leaving their positions at much higher rates than white educators, creating a predominantly and persistently white educator workforce. So you ask yourself, what are the strategies and metrics you could employ to make and measure progress towards greater educator diversity? Well, somewhere in the middle of that, and maybe this is the arrow in that diagram, is where you could start thinking about a goal for the next 3 to 5 years. And I would encourage you to think about the grain size of these goals. You don't want to go too big that using this root cause analysis says, our goal is to increase educator diversity. Okay, great. I think that's everybody's goal. The question is, what are you going to do that? So the goal has to be really written to be meaningful and impactful at a probably smaller grain size than that. If the big aspirational goal is to increase educator diversity, what you want to ask yourself is, what is it that we might implement or do differently to make that happen, to make it change. Our data set change so that we do have more educators of color staying in their positions rather than leaving their positions. So thinking about what the research and evidence base says, and heads up, in the coming months, we will be doing more technical assistance webinars to really dig into some of these research and evidence-based strategies. But I'll give you a highlight of one that will come, and that is the importance of having culturally responsive and sustaining conditions, school climate and culture. What we know from the research and evidence base across the nation, and it's not different, I'm sure, in Connecticut, is that teachers of color, educators of color, one of the reasons they identify for leaving teaching before their 5 years tenure is the conditions are awful in their school. They don't feel safe. They don't feel, yep, that's right, a sense of belonging. They perhaps, and I think the tide is changing in Connecticut with other things happening with curriculum. They don't feel that their identities and the identities of their students are affirmed through curriculum, and through the kinds of cultures that are supported or not supported in schools. And so, you may decide from a root cause analysis scenario that's similar to this, that maybe one of the things in the retention area of your template, of your plan, maybe some focus on how do we create a more positive school culture where students and educators of all backgrounds feel a sense of belonging. I just made that one up, right? Like, I could imagine that would be a goal that could land on some people's plans. Then, as you're building out the template, we just kind of, use this scenario and continue to move through the template. In the spirit of and the interest of making sure that your reform effort is effective, it's really important to have an owner for each of these goals. So we talked about a team leader who's sort of taking some responsibility to move the initiative forward, the effort forward at a large scale. Within the plan, you'll want to identify owners for each of the goals. Again, that owner takes that responsibility at a micro level in your work. They're going to take responsibility for really collecting data, tracking, not that they have to do it alone, but they're going to be the point person to, assemble that, again, another smaller team that might really be focused on advancing that goal. So in your plan template, getting clear and thinking about who's going to manage that goal, who is a person. Nothing wrong with co-leads on managing things, but I think what we all appreciate is really important to know who's on first so we don't get tripped up. We don't assume, oh, my co-lead is doing that, and then I don't do it, and then the co-lead thought I was doing it, and then it never gets done. So really being clear about who's taking ownership for what parts, and who's going to ensure that there's follow-up on things that we identify need follow-up on. The next set of columns under strategies and key activities is where you start. Some of you might be familiar with like Gantt charts. There's other ways to like organize these kinds of efforts in project management tools. But this is where you're going to chart out and think through as a team. If this is the goal, then what are we going to do? Like, we get down to like the strategic level. What are the strategies? What are the tactics? Like, what are the actual things? We want to support a stronger school culture. What are those research and evidence-based strategies to do that? One of the things that the literature highlights as a promising practice is affinity groups, right? And so maybe you decide, our school doesn't have affinity groups, and that maybe this could be a useful, among others, but a useful strategy to implement in the next, 2 years. And we're going to track progress and collect data, and we're going to set a timeline to sort of, develop the affinity groups, run them, collect data from participants, see how they're going, and create sort of that timeline for that particular strategy to see how well it's helping you to accomplish your goal. So that's what that middle section of the template is really designed to do. And then you obviously want to get into like, well, how are we going to know that what we put in place is working? And those are your indicators of progress. So being really clear with yourselves going in, here are the indicators of progress we're going to track on. Maybe you're going to do some focus group interviews with folks that are in the affinity groups. Do surveys after, each meeting or something, just to find out how people are feeling. You're probably going to want to look at some long-term indicators of progress too. Let's say 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, to see in what ways is your affinity groups contributing to any changes in retention of teachers of color, educators of color in your system. And then in the spirit of a true action plan, there's space on here for everybody to think about what are the resources going into this that we're going to need. Remember, CSDE is going to be reviewing these. So look, I don't work at CSDE. I'm a partner. I'm a friend to all of you. And what I would tell you is this is a great place to put. If you want some things from the state, put it in there. Say, to do this well, we could really benefit from X, Y, and Z. Put some dollar amounts. And if enough of you put something in there, you better believe they're going to pay attention. They're going to flag it. They're going to see it. And there could be opportunities for you all to get. Look, I'm not making any promises. I'm certainly, look, the ideas and thoughts shared by Dr. Saroja Warner on this call today do not represent the beliefs and opinions of the CSDE or the state of Connecticut. So I'll give you that disclaimer. But I'll say that my experience with these kinds of things is that if they're giving you an opportunity to identify the resources you need, sure, you're going to identify and you should identify the resources that you're going to bring to bear to your reform effort. But it doesn't hurt to say, and if we had this, we really could do a little bit more. This would go a long way to help us. So there's your opportunity in the resources required section. And then the last two around, getting ahead of any risks, thinking ahead as a team. Are there risks to what we're purporting to want to do? And what could be some mitigation strategies to get ahead of that? So sort of thinking ahead to that. And then, of course, communication strategies, because in order for any of this work to be successful, we really need to be communicating effectively internally as a team, a little more broadly across our system, and certainly externally with the folks that this is all in service to. And so getting clear and thinking about what are the communication efforts that need to be launched in tandem with what we're trying to accomplish, maybe before we start something, while we're doing something, as we're wrapping something up. Who could be the points, the point of contacts, the leads on those communication activities as well. So we just, think that this particular action plan template is going to be really helpful to all of you as you're starting to chart your course and to think about how you can do something that is going to lead to impact within the next 3 to 5 years. It's not inclusive of all of the things you're going to want to consider or you may consider, but it's certainly, I think, some of the key essential things and would serve you well. I think will serve you well. Are there questions from people? I'm monitoring the chat, not seeing anything. Maybe people are eating ramen too and their mouths are full, our hands are busy. Like when I eat my ramen, I've got this big thing. So I'm like eating and sipping and we'll give a window for people to put something in there.
Perfect. I was going to say, Saroja, only the chat is the chat is the only option. So maybe give a moment for folks to type their questions or thoughts. And I really loved the example that you chose, obviously. And I think, there's some tools that I might have shared when we did the coaching series with folks, but really thinking about different levels of engagement. Obviously, not everybody can be on your team, but thinking about how do you use other key messengers, key stakeholders in the work in your school and broader community to help lift some of these efforts, especially when you are getting into the action work, really ensuring that it's not just you doing the heavy lift alone, but really using everybody around you to do that lift. So thank you for that reminder.
Right on, right on. The other thing too, again, as people are thinking and perhaps typing, that's coming up is we'll be offering some office hours as well. And so, the sooner folks can get started on drafting, do your root cause analysis, come up with some draft goals, come January, we'll be reaching out again. I know this is a tough time of the year, December, in your schools, wrapping up things and trying to get coordinated. So come January, we'll be announcing some office hours that our team will be available to folks to come and engage in some thought partnership, get some like early feedback from us as you're developing the plan. So just kind of shouting out that's coming. And so the sooner you can get started, if you haven't already, the better.
So Rosia, I think another message, and please chime in, I think you said it best as we prepped for the session, is that it's wanting folks to embrace this as really a learning and reflective activity. I think both of our districts really highlighted how this was learning work, and this is like an ever evolving process. So don't be scared by like, this is the template and there's some grade you're gonna get on your paper, that it's really about the learning and the progress, and there will be feedback given, but it's really about investing in the work and documenting your root causes, the goals that you're making, and the efforts that you're investing in it. So I just wanted to reiterate that message because I think that was a really helpful collaborative partner message. And I think there was a question in the chat.
I think the question in the
Just in
chat
time.
was a question for Altressa regarding how you're thinking about selecting students or what role students will have, understanding that your intention, Enfield's intention is to introduce students to the process in the next school year rather than this school year.
Right. So I'm sorry, I had entered a response earlier, but as I had mentioned, we want their involvement because they're right there with the teachers and they must have thoughts regarding qualities that make effective teachers and who they would like to recommend to move forward if we get them into the candidates into interviews. But we have not, other than list that as a goal, we haven't gone any further with that. Right now, we are focused on creating the cultural module addressing microaggressions and unconscious bias. So I thought I put in there, I look forward to experiencing that. We need to think about how we're going to go about selecting students to participate, hoping that there is wide interest in doing that, and how much weight we will give to their contributions to the discussions and everything. But we have not explored that yet.
Thank you. So I just want to share that when my youngest child was in middle school, he was a student who was selected to be part of interview teams for his middle school teachers and administrators. And I too, as a parent, was also on the team. So it was obviously there was some criteria for how students were selected, but it was a fascinating process to watch. He was not the only student that was part of the interview team, but he was one of the students, and the questions that students ask, the things that they care about and that are important to them are oftentimes very different from what adults are looking for and consider. I will also tell you that in my work at the SDE in the turnaround office, it was a model that I suggested for one of the districts when they hired one of their administrators at the high school. And it turns out that the student choice, and there is no guarantee that who the students would be who ultimately is selected for the position. But in this particular case, the candidate who the students wanted to be their assistant principal was in fact given the offer and accepted the offer to become the assistant principal. And one of the things that he said to me was that there was a different kind of accountability, understanding that students chose him and students had been part of the process that chose him. It was a different level of accountability for him to them. And it was wonderful for him to experience their empowerment to the extent that they felt very comfortable reminding him of the answers that he gave as part of the interview process, the promises that he made, and where sometimes he fell short, they would remind him. And he said it was the first time that he had that experience in a way that was that impactful to him. He said, what I did and what I said in that interview was listened to, was trusted, and it created an expectation that I was going to do what I said I was going to do. And when I fell short, or when somehow sometimes I wasn't thinking about it in the same way that they were, they let me know that. He said, and that made all the difference for me. So I encourage districts to think about including students and or parents, because at the end of the day, they are the users of this experience, right? Charmaine said the product is people, and the people for the most part are people who are, pre-K to approximately 18 years old. And they can tell you precisely what they feel is working for them in educational systems and what has not worked, particularly for students of color. And if there are no further questions, I think Jessica will close us out.
Yes. So just a reminder from the beginning, from the very top, the biggest thing is making sure that you're reflecting upon your data for your district. So there's some very important links to keep in mind when you are going into your root cause analysis work. Is just visiting the educator diversity dashboard, really getting good insight on trends within your district, to see what are some possible next steps to take just based upon that data that you receive. Also, making sure to check into your EdSite data portals, really looking at the teacher-student ratios when it comes to teachers and students of color. That would be a great support for you to go ahead and get that initial work done to really get a deep dive in when you're beginning this work for root cause analysis, and then transferring that into your template for creating that plan. As mentioned throughout this whole webinar, the guidebook is going to be a key tool for you to use along with the toolkit. I know Saroja threw into the chat at some point, just really reflecting on that Brookside story that's inside of the guidebook, just to get a insight into how that district went about creating their plans and their processes for making sure that they are looking at the whole picture when it comes to creating their increasing educator diversity plans and how to implement that. So please make sure you visit, take a look at the guidebook and the toolkit. They are linked in here. And again, making sure that you have a clear idea, clear cut picture of your educator diversity dashboard within your district. So in the end, again, we mentioned this from our first webinar that we have. We do have an email inbox set up for the IED plan, including educator diversity plans. So please feel free to email that is SCE@iedplans.dt.gov for any questions that you may have. If you have any questions for our special guest today, Altressa or Charmaine. We can always forward those questions or connect you so that way we can make sure that you get all the accurate responses that you need to really push you forward with your plans. And again, as a reminder, plans are due March 15th. We do have our previous recorded webinars and slide decks on our talent page, as Regina mentioned in the beginning of this webinar. And this webinar, along with the slide deck, will be posted on the talent website of the CSDE's website as well for you to refer back to. There's lots of great discussion, lots of great information shared. So we just want to thank all of our guest speakers today, Andy, Charmaine, and Altressa for sharing your experiences, your work. Keep forging forward with all that you're doing. You're doing amazing work within your districts, and everything that you shared will really be useful for all the other districts that are either in the middle of this, starting this, or just really trying to get a good grip on how to move forward. So thank you all for joining us. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us, and we will be sending out more information regarding upcoming technical assistance support, webinars, or office hours with you all in the future. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.